Okay, so I'm going to be doing my persuasive speech on standardized tests. Throughout the past few years, standardized tests have been a big controversy in the education world. They are also huge steps to a student's either success or failure in school, whether it be the ACT for high school students, which now even middle school students take the ACT, and in elementary school and whatnot. They can't, if they don't pass that state mandated test, then they can't move on to the next grade level the next year. So first I'm going to kind of talk about what are standardized tests. So I know you guys can't really see that back there, but for the most part, they're the same throughout. So if you're taking it with a big group, they're going to be the same, but a little bit different. The answers and questions won't be in the same order. That kind of prevents cheating and stuff like that. They may be worded a little, the questions may be worded a little bit differently. So you could have one say, what are the 4 biological molecules or something like that. And the other one could say, is this a biological molecule? So another one could be, so they're very large scale. So normally when you take one of these tests, it's at least 100 questions, if not more than that. And sometimes there's more than one subject that you're being tested in that day. So like for instance, if you take the ACT, you're going to be tested in like 4 different categories that same day within a 4 or 5 hour time span. And it's the same way with your elementary school state mandated tests, the middle school, all that stuff. They're all going to be over several categories. Now some schools may do like math one day, reading one day, so it kind of breaks it up, but then they have to do it all week instead of just one day. So some pros, cons of standardized tests. So a pro of standardized tests, these are all back here on this board. A pro is that they don't cost very much for the schools. So for the whole budget that school gets that year, they're only spending 0.1% on those state mandated tests. So they don't cost a lot for the schools, but are they really measuring the level of achievement for each child? Another one is that they don't take up very much class time. So normally each test takes between an hour and 3 hours, sometimes 4. It just depends on how many breaks you take, how many, all that kind of stuff. And then, so all of them are taken in the school. The only one that can be taken outside the school is the ACT if you decide to take that on your own, but you do get one. I know in this school district, one's provided to you through the school when you're a junior. So, some kind of negatives to the standardized test. So if you receive a low score and you're in elementary school, middle school, you won't move on to the next grade level. So if you're in first grade and you don't pass that first grade state mandated test, you're not going to move on to second grade. And that's a really big problem, I think, because if a kid doesn't test well, or if they don't sleep well the night before, so they don't do very well on that test, they're not going to move on to the next grade level because of one day. One day they took a test and they didn't do very good on it, so they're not going to pass. And that's not really fair to that child because they could be a lot smarter than they're showing on that test. Also, if you take the ACT and you get a bad score, it can affect what college you get into. So say, for instance, someone gets a 20 on their ACT. Well, for most big colleges, that's not a good enough score to get in or to get any type of educational scholarship. Another one is that it fails to measure all the attributes of a child. So the standardized tests measure math skills, language skills, reading skills, science skills, but they don't measure the student's ability to lead others. They don't measure their empathy skills. They don't measure their outside-the-box thinking. They only use their book smarts. So I have a quote here, and it's pretty long, so I didn't memorize it. But it says, contrary to popular assumptions about standardized testing, the tests do a poor job of measuring student achievement. They fail to measure such important attributes as creativity and critical thinking skills. Studies indicate that standardized tests reward superficial thinking that may discourage more analytical thinking. Additionally, because of the small sample of knowledge that is tested, standardized tests tests provide a very incomplete picture of student achievement. And that is by a researcher. And then another thing that came about is that teachers do not really all prefer standardized tests. So there was a study that came out that said only 3% of teachers thought that standardized tests were good. And it really said good. So they didn't think they were awesome. They didn't think they did well. They just thought they were good. Now, 77% of teachers thought that they weren't worth the time and money spent on those tests. So most schools spend all year prepping for these state mandated tests. And they leave out some of the maybe less important ideas that students still need but aren't on the test. So they spend all year memorizing all this stuff, and they're not actually learning it. They're just memorizing for the test, and that's not really learning. So I don't think that standardized tests really are doing their job in measuring the levels of achievement that a student is getting, and they don't measure the level of achievement that the school is doing, because that's how well the student body does on a test is how much money that school gets the next year. So if all their students do poorly on that test, it's going to lower the amount of money that they get from the state. And maybe it was just a really hard test that year. Maybe the school just didn't have a great year. But that doesn't mean that they should receive less money. That's less resources that the students are getting to help them learn.